Remember this song? For those who don't know, this is the Muvango theme song. You know, the soap opera about tradition versus modernity, a hella load of polygamy, witchcraft, and over-the-top storylines. You're probably thinking, why did I pick this song for today's intro? Well, it perfectly fits the nature of today's case. It started out so innocently. A young girl wanting to sell oranges. She did so because she wanted to go on a school trip. Probably to enjoy spending time with her friends. However, fate decided otherwise. It would all end in unresolved tragedy.
This is CrimeBrew with Kgosi Tau-Bantsi.
Welcome to the second episode of CrimeBrew, Botswana's very first true crime podcast. I'm Kgosi Tau-Bantsi and welcome back. I hope your February is treating you kindly. My February has been a bit busy and it's mainly because of A levels. And people aren't lying when they say it's stressful and really time consuming, eh? But I'm doing well regardless. Happy Black History Month and belated Valentine's Day to you all, and a special shout out to those who have subscribed on YouTube and Spotify. It really means a lot to me that you're supporting my content. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe to the show and follow us on Instagram and on Twitter. CrimeBrew's Facebook will be up and running soon. There's just a couple more issues to sort out, so please do watch the space. So today's case is another controversial case from Botswana. And in a way, it was devastatingly unique, as today's victim did not deserve what was dealt to her at all. What happened to her angered the country so much to the point that protests were taking place. And it's all because of one problem which Southern Africa couldn't curb for the longest time. Ritual killings, which we'll be discussing heavily today. So please keep that term in mind because it's very important. Today's episode includes details of graphic bodily harm. So if you're a sensitive listener, I suggest that you skip today's case and contact the organizations listed in the description below. Therefore, let's not waste any more time. Get your cups of tea ready because I've got mine ready. And let's brew the case of Segametsi Mogomotsi. Our sources for today's episode include Wikipedia, DBpedia, articles from Mechi, Sunday Standard, Good Governance Africa, PAW, the writer's blog on the case, so check out her website, and the YouTube video, The Unsolved Ritual Murder of Segametsi Mogomotsi, Shadows over Mochudi by Benny Makulu TV, so check his video out too. So one aspect of this case today is that sadly, we don't know too much about the direct players involved due to this case being ridden with rumor, speculation, and mystery. We know of one exception, which is Sekgobe Mokhalo, who we'll talk about throughout the episode. Obviously, today's victim is Segametsi Mogomotsi, and the events of today's case takes place in the village of Mochudi, which is 42 kilometers north of Gaborone, and is the tribal capital of the Bakhatla tribe, one of the richest tribes in Botswana. And I mean very rich, like they own platinum mines in the northwest in South Africa. And this case's timeline spans the years beginning in 1994 up until now. Because today's case is still unsolved. And you'll understand why, because of the gravity of the topic of today's case. To understand the nature of today's case, we need to delve deep into the history of ritual killings. In Africa, the topic of religion versus spiritual belief is a heavily debated topic within many countries in the continent. Myths and folklore about spirits and witchcraft have been passed down from generation to generation, either through oral tradition or written recollections. Even through the colonization craze that the British, French, and Portuguese underwent to quote-unquote humanize Africa during the 19th century by introducing Christianity to its colonies, the belief in tradition persisted, although some kingdoms and languages were destroyed as a result. This was no different in Southern Africa, as many traditional doctors, known as sangomas, are present throughout South Africa, Botswana, Zimbabwe, and more. One central concept of spiritual tradition is the idea that to attain something, you have to make a sacrifice. Thus, this is where ritual killings comes into play. Now, what does ritual killings consist of? Well, many sangomas would orchestrate the sacrifices of animals and various types of people, particularly young people, and would use their body parts to concoct traditional medicine known as muti. Then, sangomas would provide their muti to a wide variety of clients who are looking to either become wealthy, have enlarged sexual body parts, bring back lost ex-lovers, getting rid of bad luck, or getting revenge on someone you hate. Like, have you ever gone to the Gaborone bus rank and seen all of those posters from those different sangomas listing, if you want your lover back, contact Sangoma John, and blah, 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 blah. I know, really terrible name for a sangoma, but some names I can think of is Papa John or something, but I don't know, yeah, just John came to mind. So yeah, sorry. This type of spiritual sacrifice was very prominent in Botswana for decades, especially in the 1930s, when the country was still called Bechuanaland due to its colonial protection by the British. Throughout those years, the Bechuanaland Protectorate Police were investigating various ritual killings involving sangomas, fellow conspirators, and their victims. However, the issue of ritual killings would continue to persist, and in this case, unfold in the worst ways possible. Segametsi Mogomotsi was born in 1980 in Mochudi, Botswana. Unfortunately, there isn't a lot of details about her childhood prior to the events of today's case. What we do know was that she was raised in Mochudi by her mother and stepfather, who was someone we should keep out for, so keep Segametsi's stepfather in mind. In 1994, she became a Form 1 student at Radikolo Community Junior Secondary School. And you'd expect the story to just end right now. She's got a lot going for her. However, fate intervened. Keep in mind that the exact details of Segametsi's case are riddled with rumors and discrepancies. So what I'm about to tell you might or might not be entirely true. On the 6th of November 1994, Segametsi was selling oranges at Mochudi's market. Why was she selling oranges, you might ask? Well, she was raising money to go on a school trip, thus deciding to sell oranges to pay off her school trip. Towards the end of the afternoon, a group of men saw her and bought some oranges from her, but they didn't have enough change. However, they promised Segametsi that they'll return the money they owe her, and she accepted their offer. The men went away, and Segametsi would wait for the next few hours, right up until the evening, waiting for the men to return. Then, Segametsi got kidnapped, and it could possibly be the men who bought the oranges from her earlier, or a different set of men. What happened next was that she disappeared with these men, and she was taken to a secluded area, and cloth was put in Segametsi's mouth, apparently. I can imagine that this was a terrifying experience for her, but unfortunately, it only got worse for her. This was because she got murdered by the very same men who kidnapped her. The kidnappers took it a step further. And this is the point where things become very, very graphic. So if you've listened up until this point, listen with care. They mutilated her corpse by cutting off her arms, legs, breasts, tongue, and her vagina. And they threw away what was left of her body. That's utterly gory and shocking. Like, when I was researching this, I was just like, what the fuck? How the fuck did these guys just remove every from a 14-year-old girl? Anyway, what was left of her body was discovered the next day. And once her body was discovered, her family was in utter shock and disbelief, as the daughter was maliciously killed. And she didn't piss off anyone, you know. She wasn't anyone's enemy or some sort. What they didn't know was that her death had opened up a Pandora's box. The police soon got to work investigating the case, and they realized that due to the condition of her body by the time it was discovered, it was no ordinary killing. Thus, to the police, it seemed like another ritual killing. The suspicions were only further proven when Segametsi's stepfather came to the police station to reveal a big piece of information. Brace yourselves for this. Segametsi's stepfather confessed to orchestrating Segametsi's murder along with a Sangoma and a couple of businessmen because they wanted to use her body parts as part of their sacrifice for their muti concoction to become rich and wealthy. Which is shocking if you ask me, because Segametsi may not be your blood, but you're still a father figure to her through marrying her mother. And if that was true, you're basically the worst father in the world to even consider such thoughts to a young child who's basically supposed to be your surrogate daughter. Like, why? Just why? Anyway, the police placed Segametsi's stepfather in custody. But another infuriating detail which came up during the investigation was that Segametsi's stepfather retracted that confession. Yeah, you heard me correctly. The confession he made, he was just like, nah, that ain't true. He solely placed the blame on the Sangoma and businessmen he implicated. Make it make sense, because what the hell, man? How do you say one thing and say the exact opposite thing the next day? That's fucking up an investigation 101. Always changing your story. Anyway, the police had to let him go because they don't have actual evidence that connects him or any of the other businessmen to Segametsi's murder. This was purely a circumstantial case, and by the looks of it, it could only get worse from here. And the businessmen that Segametsi's father implicated were all arrested for Segametsi's murder. One of them included Sekgobe Mokhalo. Now, everyone in Mochudi thought that the case was finally solved and justice can be served for Segametsi. However, due to Segametsi's stepfather retracting his confession, all of the businessmen, including Mokhalo, were also let go from the case as suspects. This sparked outrage across Mochudi, which would soon grow to higher levels. Mochudi went nuts upon hearing that all of the main suspects involved in Segametsi's case were released from police custody. And it's understandable because they're angry. They're angry for her family and for their own fears too, because one question everybody thought of since her murder, especially young girls at the time, was, could I be next? As a response, students at Segametsi School, Radikolo Community Junior Secondary School, marched to the District Commissioner's office in Mochudi. This march happened in January 1995. And the reason why Radikolo students marched to the District Commissioner's office was to protest their belief that the government were in on the ritual killing crisis in Botswana. And they made sure that Segametsi's murder would never, ever be solved. And this march would spark several more protests and riots within Mochudi, as fires were started by various mobs at the houses of the suspected businessmen throughout the entire village. And the riots, which left 15 injured in Mochudi and one young boy dead as a result of injuries he sustained, spread as far as Gaborone, where students from the University of Botswana and Gaborone Senior Secondary School were at the forefront of these protests. UB students, that's what we call people from University of Botswana, UB students stormed into a parliament meeting at the National Assembly in Gaborone, demanding that the government should look into Segametsi's murder much more, since the police had slopped around in the investigation. Oh, there was even a Revolutionary War Council, which threatened vigilante justice if the police or the government did not do anything about Segametsi's murder. They were willing to take the law into their own hands. And things got so bad to the point whereby BDF soldiers, our national defense in Botswana, BDF soldiers used tear gas and rubber bullets on protesters on the street. To say that Gaborone became a war zone was an understatement. So much so that the president at this time, Segametsi Mogomotsi, asked Scotland Yard, the headquarters of the London Metropolitan Police, to take over investigating Segametsi's case. This was a case that quickly became a big deal because everybody in Botswana was asking this question. Does spiritual tradition, witchcraft, and ritual killings have a place in Botswana's emerging modern society? Despite this big move Masira made to bring Segametsi's murderers to justice, nothing came out of it. When Botswana's third president, Festus Mogae, came into power in 1998, he was asked by students for an update on Segametsi's case from Scotland Yard. And he said something along the lines of, why don't you ask them yourselves? Why don't you ask them yourselves? Terrible joke if you ask me. Anyway, remember Sekgoba Bogalo? One of the businessmen that was suspected of murdering Segametsi? Well, he sued the government for mistreatment of the justice system on him in 1995. And 13 years later, in 2008, he would successfully win his lawsuit. He received about 300,000 pula according to the Sunday Standard, but other sources state that he received 1 million. We don't know. All we know was that he won his lawsuit against the government. Despite the outrage many Botswana felt in the immediate aftermath of Segametsi's murder, the protests phased out, and her case was never solved afterwards. Therefore, her name was quickly forgotten. The nature of Segametsi's passing is horrific, very horrific. And the fact that her case was never solved due in part to the police's very sloppy and practically lazy investigation of her case is mind-boggling. It almost makes you wonder, has anything changed since then? Because if the police were useless then and they're still useless now, God knows how useless they're going to be in the future. What's upsetting about this case is that still to this day, her family has more questions than answers. Did Segametsi's stepfather really orchestrate the murder of his own stepdaughter of a sangoma and businessman, all for financial gain? Are these men that kidnapped her and grievously mutilated her body ever going to be caught? We don't know. Segametsi may be buried, but I'm sure that she isn't at peace with her soul because of the mere fact that someone or some people would think of not only murdering a child, but also grievously mutilating her body for a financial sacrifice. She died for other people's riches. Let me repeat that again. She died. She got murdered for other people's riches. As much as we don't know about her and the life she lived prior to her death, I can imagine that she wanted to live a life which didn't define her background, where she could achieve all of her dreams and aspirations and would be a productive member of our society. It's unimaginable how that was snuffed out of her at her extremely young age. And to those who have conspired to have her killed for their benefit, I hope your days are numbered. Your time to be punished will be soon, and it doesn't have to be from the judicial system. Speaking of which, our judicial and policing system should really face massive reforms in the future. Because if you think about it, Segametsi's case isn't unique. There are many other children that have unfortunately suffered the same fate as she did. And we don't know about it because of the massive coverage that Segametsi's case got. In my opinion, ritual killings in Southern Africa should be properly looked at and persecuted with the same seriousness as higher grade crimes. Because it is one type of murder at the end of the day. Unless we are becoming apathetic with the discord between modernity and traditional spirituality, we need to be working together to cultivate a safer environment for our next generation and promote unity between Christianity and traditional spirituality. It's going to be slow, but it's a necessity for the greater good of the world. Plus, we should not in any way forget Segametsi's name. She must not in any way become a martyr for the escalating ritual killing crisis, because she was a real person at the end of the day. Therefore, I hope her family manages to find peace along with her case being revisited and investigated with the respect it deserves. In conclusion, may Segametsi's memory be properly honored and her case finally reaching a conclusion in the foreseeable future. And that was the case of Segametsi Mogomotsi, a very tragic event which should have never happened. As a society in Botswana currently dealing with the surge of gender-based violence cases nationwide, this case should be used as an example as to how the young and harmless are never truly safe in this world today because of the appropriation of abuse in all forms and concepts in our lives. And that needs to change ASAP. Anyway, if you enjoyed this episode, comment below, share, like, and follow CrimeBrew on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook will be up and running soon, so keep that in mind. Also follow my personal Instagram, which I've linked below. Today was a really short episode compared to our first episode. 2 hours, 40 minutes long. Good grief. So I hope you really enjoy today's episode. And next month, we're going to South Africa to explore one of the most shocking farm attacks of all time, and the family at the center of this attack who didn't know that a monster was lurking from beneath a seemingly shy face. Try guess what it is in the comment section on Spotify and YouTube if you can. But until then, continue brewing your cups of tea, bagaitso, and I'll see you in March for the next episode of Crime Brew with Kgosi Tau-Bantsi.